Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another Half-Bred Chaos reaction. This one is everything we know about in Undertale. Yeah, that really doesn't, narrow it down at all, unless by Redacted you're talking about Gaster, but even then, I mean, they could be talking about anything else. I really don't know. And literally in the description right here, what is Redacted Undertale? Is Redacted Gaster? Is Redacted Des? Does Redacted have some hints about the night in Deltarune? And more importantly, does it speak in Wingdings? So apparently, not even Half-Bred knows what this video is going to be about, so it's a complete mystery. Though, that being said, I do see that, at the bottom of the description, there's, a link towards Molly Starr's Device Theory Part 1. So, does it have something to do with that and Device Theory? Well, I mean, Device Theory, the Part 1 didn't really actually go into the theory at all, so... Jeez, I don't know. So I guess we just gotta see what this video is actually about then. Yeah, I guess, as always, original video's linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. And yeah, well, out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
Here's a question for you. What is Redacted? Is it Gaster? The Knight? Foreshadowing for the poor soul trapped in the unused space in Deltarune's code? Why does it speak in lowercase wingdings? Let's dive deeper than any theorist ever has before and go over all the information we currently have about Redacted. Before we get
I've never seen that sprite before. What even is that? Wait a minute, I just remember, oh god, okay, now I remember I have seen that before. In that one video where, like, they, where he puts, like, Gaster, like, animations to, like, Cave Johnson audio from Portal 2. There was the one clip where they had, Gaster and that thing fighting over who is the real Gaster. Oh.
Cave Johnson here. I need you to do not listen to this man. He's the other Cave Johnson. He's an imposter. You're the imposter. Imposter. Chariots, chariots. Oh yeah? Chariots, chariots, chariots.
Okay, is that where we're going with this? Okay.
Okay, how did we get here?
Very important, yes.
You know how you can edit the room number of your save file to 264 in order to reach entry 17, aka Gaster's room, aka the origin of the phrase dark, darker, yet darker, and the spooky sound that plays whenever you use your phone in Deltarune's dark world?
Yeah.
Alright, well, this is not the only time that Undertale uses the Wingdings font. Turns out, there's a secret NPC located in room 272 who also speaks in Wingdings, known simply as Redacted. Now, to redact something is to basically edit it out of the finished product. Usually, you'll hear this word in regards to the text of a legal document.
Yeah, I remember seeing this.
Sometimes information needs to be obscured for legal or security purposes. Most of you probably know this word from the SCP Foundation,
yeah.
as the whole gimmick around that site is the idea that some types of information are inherently hazardous just to be known about. So by naming this sprite and room Redacted, Toby is basically saying, this used to exist, but I had to remove it. Which some have taken as evidence that, in addition to being scattered across time and space, WD Gaster may have been somehow removed from people's memories or awareness entirely, similar to the speech that Goner Kid gives about imagining a world in which you never existed, and everything functions exactly the same without you. However, because access to Redacted is locked behind Toby's hackers-only dog check, the actual canonicity of this has always been a bit fuzzy. And the fuzzy evidence waters get even murkier when we consider Toby's odd tendency to include Gaster, Mystery Man, and Redacted references in official Undertale merch only to suddenly remove or redact them. It could
Wait, I'm sorry, he did what? Really? Oh god, why is it never easy?
be argued that both of these potential Gaster depictions have a tendency to disappear without a trace, so you can see why there's a lot of fan debate regarding which of these sprites is the true Gaster sprite. Or
I mean, I could potentially see it being as they're both Gaster. It's just, a different form of Gaster. Because, one speaks in lowercase, one speaks in uppercase. I could see the lowercase version potentially being, especially since there's like, the big white thing in the front. Maybe it's like when he's depressed and he's just sort of like a big blah. I don't have a better word to describe it, but he's just sort of there. And maybe when he's more sad and depressed, he's he loses, himself essentially, and basically starts to melt or disintegrate into the ether of the void. And if you talk to him, then he's like low energy, all lowercase, and then it like uppercase is when he's pulled himself back together. He's more basically he's more there basically.
Or whether there even is such a thing to begin with, given one of the NPCs describes him as shattered into pieces, and given that the redacted sprite shows evidence of having been scribbled over with paint tools to obscure its features. But what does this have to do with the knight? Well, brace yourself for this one, because to answer that question, we're going to have to dig into the secret obscure Undertale data.
Oh no.
Deep within the game's code, there is an item simply called stable, which, when interacted with, reads, "It's a horse stable. Do you want to go inside?" Choosing no closes the box instantly, but saying yes will reveal that it is locked, before suddenly dropping this creepy narration, saying that, suddenly, from inside the redacted, you hear a, and then the dialogue abruptly ends. By referring to this as a horse stable
really
initially,
weird.
but then replacing the word with redacted later, this implies that the phrase, horse stable, has been redacted. And those of you who subscribe to Aussie's chess theory may remember, the horse in chess is officially known as the knight. Hence, if redacted is meant to be a reference to Gaster, then this would make Gaster the knight.
The what theory? In chess, this is the order of pieces sorted by the value. The king is first, followed by the queen, then the rook, knight, bishop have equal value, and the pawn is the least valuable. This matches Deltarune. Huh. Okay, I didn't know that. Also, I would have thought that the rook and bishop would have been equal, with the knight being worth less. Okay.
Theory may remember, the horse in chess is officially known as the knight.
Yeah.
Hence, if redacted is meant to be a reference to Gaster, then this would make Gaster the knight. I've also heard it argued by the very talented Omegawatt that redacted might be a reference to the person calling out to us, trapped in the unused code, and or, potentially, Des, as this would provide an alternative explanation as to why the sprite seems to look like, to some people, a lady with long hair drooping over her face, and it would line up with her being cut content from Undertale, and missing in Deltarune. The redacted sprite does play this song, Premonition, when approached, a song which utilizes the same leitmotif as before the story, the song which plays on the file select screen after you beat either chapter of Deltarune.
I know, I could tell that they're the same.
This song is also heard when Sans talks to the player about the Echo Flowers, which is one of the very few places in the game that might potentially be referencing Des and Noelle as a pair of sisters wishing on a star and dreaming of escaping the prison and going together to see a new world with shining lights.
Oh, jeez. Oh, that'd be sad. Then again, I'm thinking of how Des and Noelle were depicted in, the fan game Delta Traveler. But just the idea that... It's really sad. All the generations of monsters that were just trapped under there with no hope.
That said, I do take objection to the idea of this being more important, or canon, just because it is so narratively intriguing, as I personally find a lot of the cut content to be narratively fascinating. My favorite so far is the mushroom NPC, who's anchored to the ground by their mycelium, and who longs to escape, not to the surface, but merely to the room beyond this one, as spending their whole life anchored to this spot has left them wondering and fantasizing about it for as long as they can remember. It's very easy to fall into the trap of assuming that playtesting is purely about fine-tuning the mechanics and combing for bugs, when really, narrative playtesting is just as important to the creation of a game, as an idea that seems compelling in your head might not always have the intended effect once it's actually executed on. Based on the placeholder-like look of the sprites, the ghost-like fading that redacted shares with Napstablook, the location of the associated files and flags, and the very unfinished feel of the code, my best current guess regarding Redacted is that when Toby started testing this, he didn't quite like the way it was coming out, so instead of wasting time trying to perfect a flawed idea, he likely just scrapped it and started over fresh with something else. If that were correct, then Redacted might be the precursor to the Mystery Man event, which behaves similarly. Or maybe even the pre-bird room, which, while also cut, is still accessible without the use of hacking tools simply by changing the room number to 123, as this is one of the few unused rooms that is not locked out by the dog check, a trait this room shares with entry 17. Then again, as mentioned before, Redacted is in some of the official Undertale merch, and who knows, I could be wrong. So, instead of dictating to you all the true meaning of Redacted...
Well, then again, actually think about it. Was Toby actually the one in charge of creating the look of, like, for the merch and stuff like that? Because, you know, the whole thing with them being removed, could it have possibly been that you had some outside artists that they were just making, like, the cover art and stuff like that, and they were just pulling sprites from the game, put them there, and it's not until, like, later that Toby saw it and said, hey, those aren't supposed to be there, and they were removed.
How about instead, I take you on a journey through the code to show you everything I can currently find about Redacted, the stable, and all the unanswered questions that surround it. The first challenge comes in simply trying to figure out where the horse stable is even meant to go, as all of the relevant code for it seems to skip over this rather crucial detail, leading to much speculation about its intended location. However, the stable's creation code provides coordinates for where it should be within its room, as well as the depth it's supposed to rest at. So in theory, we can just place the object in random rooms at those coordinates and see how it appears. Let's see. If we place it in the room with Sans' sentry station, it seems to line up perfectly with the spooky unexplained door behind Sans. Although, it also blocks...
Right, yeah, that door. I always forget about it.
Sans' sprite from view, which would be pretty weird, given that the code does bother to specify the stable's depth. It would also make certain other features of this stable inaccessible, so we can probably safely cross this off the list. We can also cross the...
I mean, then again, it might, if it was there, because that almost fits perfectly, it might literally just be that it was going to be there originally, but then it got changed to, you know, Sans' guard station.
The quiche room off of the list, since it clips through the wall at these coordinates. Same for the statue room, the legendary artifact room, and the fake hallway leading up to the Mystery Man.
It's in the walls!
It technically works in the Ice Cream Man's room, in the sense that it doesn't clip into any objects or walls. But it does also create a bit of an issue with the vibe of this room. Not to jump too far ahead, but this stable was intended to have some unsettling properties that might create some tonal dissonance if they took place right next to the ice cream shop.
I mean, you never know, that might have been the point.
It could go in the room right outside this shop, and its removal would actually make sense, as it would explain why this area over here is inaccessible, and seems to have been intended to be reached via a secret hidden passage through this wall, which is alluded to by both the telescope and the Easter egg text about the beautiful gems along the south wall. There is also a functional echo flower over here, although, since no text is specified for it, it just uses the same dialogue as the flower to its immediate right. But I digress. The most common place I see this stable added is in Napstablook's yard. This is likely because the stable choice or dialogue is right before the dialogue of Blooky's house, which implies that it was written first. The code for this room also seems like it was originally supposed to contain a trash can with a key to the stable, which is barely visible to the naked eye. Once you have the key, you can. Oh goodness. Oh geez, I didn't even use the key yet. Turns out simply having the key sets the stable quest flag to flag 3 and changes the open variable from 0 to 1, which summons the redacted sprite into the stable. And since it uses the same properties as Napstablook, it only becomes visible once the player approaches. However, if the stable were placed in the same room as the trash can, the coordinates tell us that it would be tucked away behind Metaton's house, partially obscuring the redacted sprite, which might ruin the effect somewhat. Although, maybe Toby thought this would make it even spookier? I can't really be sure. It should be noted that in the room order, just behind Napstablook's house and farm, is the previously mentioned pre-bird room, also known as room 123, which is definitely creepy enough for the stable, and it places the stable quite close to the trigger here, in which an unseen NPC asks Frisk to please do something about the friend standing right behind them with a creepy smile.
Oh god, okay, that's what that... I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
And there's no way this next part was planned, okay?
What's this
But I have
cover?
to at least point it out. The flag for the stable's behavior is flag 92, and if you open up your save file, flag 92 is located at line 123, which is the same number as this room. Coincidence? Almost definitely.
Oh.
Looking at the flag list, it does seem like the stable flag was created before the line about our creepy friend, though. So even if this was not the intended context for this stable, it would make sense if the stable were located here, as it's a big and grassy space which partially obscures the stable, so that the head of Redacted is just barely peeking over. But what if we go even deeper? By breaking the fabric of reality and rewinding time itself, we can obtain an earlier version of Undertale, from before Toby implemented the fun events and made the blue attacks colorblind accessible. Here.
Wait, so the fun events weren't always there? Oh, that's different. Okay.
In version 1.00, we can find a triple secret line of code specifying a second stable, which, when interacted with, reads, "It's a stable for snails." A snable. My god. This changes everything. This explains why, in the code, the stable object appears to have been created just after the snail objects and just before the redacted and farm objects were created. It explains this weird, seemingly ignored patch of the farm with all the loose snails hanging around, and this weird line about the snail being overdue for a second house, as based on the coordinates of the horse stable, we can fit one snail stable on either side of it. It also places Napstablook's line about a customer who suddenly disappeared, closer to redacted. And, although I'm sure Napstablook was referring to Toriel here because we know Toriel likes her some escargot, Undertale has a long history of making this sort of tongue-in-cheek callback to draw comparisons between seemingly unrelated story elements. So yeah, that check.
Seemingly unrelated story elements. So Sans and Papyrus, you know, the brothers.
Out. Putting the stable here also makes it pretty easy to test it for bugs, since it's right next to the key and the save point. So even if I turn out to be wrong about this, I hope you don't mind me using this assumption for most of my footage.
Huh, okay. I mean, granted, that makes a lot of sense.
Holy congadero, that was 900 words just to find the room for the horse stable. Can you see why nobody wants to do a deep dive on this yet? But I'm sure everything else about this will be straightforward and bibbly-bibbly.
Okay, I was going to look at the time code, but what is that? I gotta hear the text-to-speech say that again.
Sure, everything else about this will be straightforward and bibbly-bibbly. Toby, why do you have this in the stable code? Why is the variable set to 349382? What is this the password for the save? I don't even. Redacted is definitely the correct word for all of the code related to the stable. Like, there are conditions with no triggers, flag conditions with no purpose, and lines upon lines of dialogue that, well, let's talk about those. The three relevant variables we have to discuss are flag 92, which tracks how far we've come with the stable, open, which handles the appearance of the stable, and con, which seems to be short for conversation. As you might imagine, flag 92 starts at 0, as does the open variable. As a result, when you first see the stable, it appears to be empty, and when interacted with, it gives the player this dialogue prompt, naming this as a horse stable, and asking the player if they'd like to go inside. Choosing no does nothing, and saying yes gives this creepy line about hearing some kind of sound from inside the redacted. But the code is non-functional from here. It seems likely that this was meant to update the conversation variable to 1, which would, in turn, also update flag 92 to 1, and set the stable's open variable to 1, although we still can't go inside yet. Once open is set to 1, the redacted sprite will spawn inside it, and the conversation variable will update to 2. I can't be sure if this was meant to be the trigger condition though, because at no point in any of the code does the condition variable get updated from 0 to 1. But, typically, that sort of variable would be updated in the same room as the associated object, because unlike a flag, it gets reset when the player leaves the room. So, for now, I'm just going to patch the game to do that so you can see what it would have looked like. Now that flag 92 is 1, the dialogue changes. But, unfortunately, for us, it seems like this, too, was redacted. We can see that talking to the stable again in the state does update flag 92 from 1 to 2. But without some way to observe the variable, you'd never know anything has changed because all of the dialogue prompts for the stable from this point on are overwritten with the same repeating line of dialogue and some code setting flag 92 to 2. We can see in the stable's alarm code that each time flag 92 updates, it's supposed to connect to a unique dialogue prompt, but since Toby literally X'd out every line here, we can't be sure how this was meant to unfold from here.
Curse you, Toby!
Nonetheless, we can see that interacting with the trash can to get this barely visible key would have also spawned redacted in the stable, and it would have set flag 92 to 3. But, because of the way the code runs in its default state, using the key doesn't do anything, as Toby's edit of the dialogue prompt will just reset the flag back to 2. Hilariously, this does mean we can keep getting the key out of the trash forever, but let's go out on a limb here and assume that before Toby redacted this dialogue once you have the key would have updated conversation to equal 3 and make one more small adjustment to fix that. Now when we use the key, the redacted will disappear, and the stable doors will snap open with a noise. And here's where things get very speculative, as from this point on, the code is just completely non-functional. I can see that the stable looks like it was intended to be solid, and it looks to me like when the doors open, it was supposed to stop being solid, so the player could walk through the open doors to enter the stable.
Okay.
But, unlike the snail stable, the horse stable is completely insubstantial. So you could always walk through it like it's not there, making this line obsolete. It also looks like flag 92 was supposed to update from 3 to 4 when the stable doors opened, but the trigger to cause this doesn't work, so nothing happens. Although, I can see that if it had worked, this would have been the last flag and would likely have ended any future dialogue with the stable, as once flag 92 is set to 4, it removes the dialogue prompts for this object altogether. But if that's the case, then why are there still 4 more redacted slots for dialogue?
For the other stable.
They must be there to preserve the integrity of the code. But what would it have been called for, if not the stable? Was redacted gonna appear behind you and ask you to take a 4-question survey? Was Napstable gonna ask you why you opened the stable? I have no idea, and it's driving me nuts. I suppose, given the initial question, do you want to enter the stable, the most likely next step would have been walking into the stable and warping the player into the redacted room, which, as mentioned before, just plays this creepy music and says, redacted, in lowercase wingdings, for as long as you're willing to sit there. The room is very small and feels claustrophobic. The white fading sprite here seems to imply that this is a ghost instead of a skeleton, which might explain why Toby dummied it out. You know, maybe it was sending too many mixed messages about the nature of Gaster.
Too many ghosts,
We can add a door transition to the stable to bring us here, of course, but since the redacted room was shuffled down to the bottom of the room list, along with all the other scrapped rooms of Undertale, we can't really be sure how this was meant to work. We can see that the original redacted room contains a marker C, which implies that we got here by moving forward 2 rooms in the index, and a door D, which moves us back 2 rooms to return us to where we came from when we try to leave the room. But, since Toby moved this room, attempting to leave while it's in this default state will shunt you into the sound test room before freezing the game, which was most likely not its intended effect, okay? It seems like the sound test room getting pulled into this discussion is an unintended side effect. And that is it. That is every single thing I know about Redacted. Is this secret foreshadowing for the identity of the knight, Gaster, or the nature of the being trapped in the unused code? A reference to Napstablook's estranged family and their silly little snail farm? Some secret quest that would have unlocked the fun values, entry 17, or some other juicy lore tidbits? I have no idea. I'm still trying to figure out what bibbly means. If I had to take a shot in the dark though, I would guess that this was a scrapped, early version of the Mystery Man Fun event. Also,
an early version of the event where Gaster's just hanging out in a barn.
found in Waterfall. We can see from the name of the redacted room that it was intended to be somewhere in Waterfall, and in general, it seems to be attempting to hit the same sort of spooky, unknowable, disappearing sprite vibes as the Mystery Man, which would explain why they both seem to make subtle allusions to Gaster. The file name for the song that plays here is Mysterious Room 2, which harkens back to the Mystery Man. But I think that by having the stable just constantly existing in the overworld as a universal piece of the game that all players experience, it would have taken away from that spooky, unknowable mystique. But what do you think? Do you know something I missed or got wrong? Do you think Redacted is related to Gaster, Des, or some other thing I didn't talk about? Let me know down in the comments. Special thanks to Space Core and Ocean Bagel for the coding help, as well as Molly Stars, who actually just released their own video on the nature of the meta-narrative that is Undertale and Deltarune.
Oh God, yeah,
so go check that out if you haven't already. And until next time.
God. Just the thought, again, so I already know, because like I've heard a couple of times where the whole idea of the, you know, the Mystery Man sprite might not even be what Gaster looks like. You never know, because at this point we've never actually seen Gaster in an official context. But the idea that, oh, we're putting so much effort into like trying to figure out what this redacted is, only for it to figure out that it's literally junk that was swept aside because it didn't quite work out and was eventually replaced with, you know, what we did get. I get all the time and effort only for it to be literally meaningless. Oh God. Yeah, that would suck. So yeah, I guess that's going to be it for now then. So yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And yeah, with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.